Our goal really is to give these women an opportunity to come and interact with other women in physics at many different levels, both in academia and in industry.
Berkeley physicist and conference organizer Gabriel Orey-Bigan.
And one of the ideas is to present them with information about potential career paths after a physics degree.
I was once an undergraduate woman majoring in physics. I attended the conference to speak about careers in science writing. Between the attendees there and those at 8 other concurrent conferences for undergraduate women around the country, I'm hoping future statistics on women in physics will be like the Berkeley weather, bright and sunny.
Using a 3D laser engraver, the tool used to make those glass trophies with the logo floating inside, the researchers carved cracks a few microns wide into glass slides and filled the cracks with polyurethane. The resulting glass was 200 times tougher because the microcracks dissipate energy, preventing larger cracks. The study's in the journal Nature Communications. The cracks in this study are visible, so not suitable for a smartphone screen, but the researchers say it's possible to shrink them down to less than a micron wide, an imperceptible size.
The 3 blind mice should have heard the farmer's wife coming, because a new study shows that when mice can't see, their hearing improves. Researchers kept healthy adult mice in total darkness for a week. When the mice got the lights back on, their vision quickly returned to normal, but their hearing was better. The researchers also scanned the part of the mouse brains that processes auditory signals while they played a set of tones. In the temporarily blind mice, neurons reacted to the notes more quickly. The nerves also picked up softer sounds and were better at distinguishing between different tones. The improved hearing wore off after a few weeks, but researchers are investigating ways to make it permanent.
Fed up with the polar vortex? If so, consider this. Shivering may actually share some of the benefits of exercise, at least in terms of burning fat. Researchers studied shivering in a group of 10 men and women. First, the volunteers rested under a temperature-controlled blanket, which dropped from 80 degrees Fahrenheit to a chilly 54. Then they cycled on an exercise bike. Researchers took blood samples during both activities. Turns out shivering and exercise spurred muscles to secrete similar amounts of irisin, a hormone that tells brown fat to turn up the furnace, even though exercise took 10 times as much effort. The researchers say the metabolic pathway may have evolved to save us energy. Shivering alone is a costly survival mechanism. It relies on muscle contraction to warm us.
Poverty, weak governments, and illegal logging all affect forest use, but Central America has become an important bridge between the U.S. and South America's cocaine. Forests have been slashed for roads and plane landings, and when local ranchers or timber sellers become rich with drug money, they expand their operations. Narcotic producers also develop habitat for legal agriculture that's used to launder drug money. Government agents are bribed to turn away, and conservation groups fear entering these areas. In the Bible, Abraham was impressed by how well his future daughter-in-law Rebecca cared for their camels. The animals have long been a crucial part of life in the region, opening it up to trade with lands as far as India. Camels were likely domesticated in the Arabian Peninsula about 3,000 years ago, but archaeological evidence suggested that camels arrived in the Levant well after the biblical patriarchs, theoretically about 2,500 to 3,000 years ago. Now, researchers at Tel Aviv University have nailed that date. The finding is in the peer-reviewed publication Tel Aviv, Journal of the Institute of Archaeology of Tel Aviv University. Israel's oldest camel bones are found at ancient copper mines in the Arava Valley between the Dead Sea and the Gulf.
Internet herb stores claim that swallowing oregano oil can cure your cold or flu, but the devil's in the details. Oregano oil is an antimicrobial and can even kill off that tough cruise ship plague, norovirus. But there's no evidence it can do so inside your body, scientists say. It works to inactivate pathogens before they get inside. Researchers experimented on the mouse form of norovirus, genetically similar to the hard-to-grow human strain. They treated virus colonies with solutions of either 4% oregano oil or 0.5% carvacrol, the active ingredient. Turns out oregano oil cut virus numbers by 10-fold. Carvacrol, 10,000-fold. In comparison, bleach achieves a 1,000,000-fold reduction. The results appear in the Journal of Applied Microbiology.
Stress sucks. It can affect your body and mind. Previous research has shown that stress can even hinder our ability to remember. But these studies have typically focused on one stress at a time. What happens when we face multiple stresses? Researchers looked at pond snails, often used in memory research. They trained the snails to reduce how frequently they breathe out of water. They then tracked whether the snails remembered their training after being stressed. The snail's memory was considered intact if they reduced their attempts to breathe when removed from water. Two common stressors, low levels of calcium necessary for strong shells, and overcrowding by other snails, can happen in combination in the wild. If the sight of Swiss cheese makes you melt, or the thought of a honeycomb gets you buzzing, you may suffer from trypophobia, the most common phobia that you've probably never heard of. Trypophobia is the fear of holes. People with the phobia experience panic attacks, increased heart rate, and hot sweats when they see clusters of holes. A visual scientist who suffers from trypophobia decided to investigate the phenomenon with his colleague. They performed spectral analysis on images that induce trypophobia and found that the fear-inducing images all had similar characteristics related to luminescence, contrast, and light wavelengths. But they didn't know why these features caused such an adverse reaction.
Sunscreen can help prevent skin cancer. Sunscreen can help you keep looking young. So which claim will motivate young people to use sunscreen? To find out, researchers showed videos to 50 high school juniors who use sunscreen less than once a week on average. Half saw a video that stressed the health consequences of foregoing sunscreen.
Did you know that having one bad sunburn in your life increases your chances of getting melanoma?
The others saw a video that stressed the sun's effect on appearance.
The skin damage can show up as wrinkles, dark spots, uneven skin tone, sagging skin.
6 weeks later, the kids who watched the health video hadn't changed their habits. But the students who saw the beauty video were slathering on sunscreen 3 times a week. The findings are in the Journal of the American Academy of Dermatology. The study does have one limitation. Teenagers are invincible, so they might always be prone to favor beauty over health. Still, the researchers say PSAs that combine both health and beauty messages could be just the thing to encourage older adults to change their ways.
It was the largest of the 5 major mass extinctions in Earth's history, well before the dinosaur killer 66 million years ago. What's called the End Permian extinction 252 million years ago wiped out 96% of aquatic species and 70% of species on land. Scientists have been trying to gauge the time frame of the extinction in the hopes of determining its causes. Now researchers say it's the fastest mass extinction known. Using new tools and models, including a fresh analysis of rock formations in China, the researchers determined that the extinction took only about 60,000 years. That's incredibly quick by geological standards and is more than 10 times faster than previous estimates. The report is in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. Study author Samuel Bowring from MIT says they can't yet compare the speed of the previous extinction to the extinction rates caused by human activities today. But, he says, their research is starting to help reveal how past environmental changes that influenced extinctions, such as levels of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, compare to the changes in those levels seen today, in the midst of what many call the 6th extinction.
I'm guessing you brush twice a day, or aspire to. Our ancestors were a little less diligent, but that's a good thing for scientists, because ancient plaque-coated teeth are like time capsules, preserving early evidence of cavities or even plague DNA. Now researchers have turned 1,000-year-old teeth from a convent cemetery outside Frankfurt, Germany, and they cleaned them, much like your dentist does.
We used the same dental tools, and we collected the calculus from the teeth.
That's molecular anthropologist Christina Warner of the University of Oklahoma. Inside that calculus or plaque, she and her colleagues found tiny bits of pork, bread, wheat, and cabbage, identified by their DNA.
Jazz musicians are skilled improvisers, and now we know that they craft their spontaneous melodies the same way you craft a sentence. Researchers scanned the brains of 11 professional musicians doing what's called trading fours. Two soloists take turns playing short riffs of about 4 bars. During each 10-minute session, a subject in a cramped functional MRI machine with a small keyboard traded fours with a second musician outside the scanner. As the musicians played, the language areas of their brains lit up. Specifically, the players were using the regions that normally fit words together into phrases and sentences using the rules of syntax. The study's in the journal PLOS One. The research demonstrates that the brain appears to treat creating music as a form of communication. After all, trading fours is a musical conversation, where each player makes and modifies melodies in response to the other.
That's an air gun. By exploding compressed air underwater, scientists map the subsurface of the seafloor. The process can reveal new deposits of fossil fuels and other important information. And now industry has permission to use air guns off the U.S. East Coast, which means more dead whales. Cetaceans and other marine life rely on their ears to navigate. Air guns deafen them, if not kill them outright, as the U.S. Department of Interior admits. The sound is 250 decibels or more, much louder than a jet engine. Dozens of melon-headed whales washed up dead on Madagascar beaches following similar seismic airgun testing by ExxonMobil in 2008.
Somewhere near the edges where the frame was surrounding it, it protected the painting a bit from fading. And so we analyzed what the molecules were under the frame to tell us what they should be now.
Van Dine is a pioneer in the analysis of the molecular composition of materials. In this case, he identified a red paint called Carmine Lake that was known to fade. He then showed
a recolorized version of what we imagine the painting was based on the molecular information provided by this surface-enhanced Raman spectroscopy.
The new image is much richer, the red's more vibrant, and the woman in the painting pops out with greater depth.
Data from auctions revealed that people spend more on items like jewelry rather than furniture, at least for well-liked folks such as JFK or Jackie O. Items from reviled celebs such as Bernie Madoff fetched lower bids. The findings suggest that people's desire for celebrity memorabilia stems from the belief in what's called contagion, the idea that a person's essence can be transferred through an object they touched. A follow-up experiment further supports the contagion idea. Participants said they would pay substantially less for a celebrity darling sweater if it had been sterilized. But sterilization actually increased the amount subjects would pay for a sweater owned by a disliked celebrity. Gives a whole new meaning to money laundering.
During a physical exam, doctors pick up a lot from their patients, including that patient's bacteria. To keep infections from spreading, physicians try to always wash their hands between exams, but they don't always scrub their stethoscopes. To see just how much bacteria these instruments gather, doctors examined 71 patients using sterile stethoscopes and gloves. After each exam, researchers collected samples from the stethoscope surface and tube, as well as 4 parts of the physician's gloved hands: the fingertips, backs, and 2 locations on the palm. The fingertips became by far the most bacterially contaminated, but the runner-up was the stethoscope surface, which gathered more microbes than the palms or the backs of the hands. The study is in Mayo Clinic Proceedings.
Solar system conspiracy theorists have long harbored suspicions that a hidden extraplanet or dwarf star lies beyond the orbit of Pluto. As a planet, it's been called Tyche, or simply Planet X. As a star, Nemesis. But an exhaustive search has found no hints of this long-rumored object. NASA's Wide Field Infrared Survey Explorer has scanned the entire sky in infrared light, twice, and ruled out any hidden bodies larger than Saturn, out to 10,000 times the distance from the Earth to the Sun. Furthermore, it found no evidence for anything bigger than Jupiter, out to 26,000 times the Earth-Sun distance. Pluto, for comparison, lies only 40 times farther from the Sun than Earth.
Domestic species are interesting because their genetic makeup has changed dramatically as part of the process of going from wild to domestic.
Lisa Lug, an evolutionary geneticist and anthropologist at the Universities of Oxford and Cambridge.
And indeed, when people have compared modern domestic animals with their wild relatives, they've identified genes that do show signs of strong recent selection. One such gene is thyroid-stimulating hormone receptor, otherwise known as TSHR. In chickens, a variant of this gene that is widespread in modern populations has been shown to directly cause chickens to be less fearful of humans and also result in reduced aggression towards conspecifics.
Early humans began using fire about 1 million years ago, but it's been unclear when we began to control fire for our use, a key advance in the development of culture and civilization. Now, archaeologists report the discovery of the most ancient known hearth for making and using fire. The hearth appears to be 300,000 years old. Scientists found evidence of wood ash in the center of Kesem Cave in Israel. They removed a chunk of sediment and hardened it in the lab so they could slice layers and evaluate them under the microscope. They found burnt bones, flint, wood ash, and bits of burnt clay. There's charred flint and animal bones near the hearth, along with flint tools further away used for activities such as butchering.
One seminal difference in policy remains. The Coalition has not matched what is Labour's most important innovation promise. That is to bring together responsibilities for innovation, industry, science and research under one single federal minister. Innovation responsibilities currently lie within the powerful Department of Education and Science, and while there is a separate industry department, it has little influence within Cabinet. This has hampered policy development and given Australia's innovation policies a distinctly science and research bias. It is the scientists, rather than the engineers, who call the tune in innovation policy in Canberra. So it's no surprise our policies are all about boosting government-funded research, and later commercialising their results.
We've decided to adopt, just as a loose theme for the course, a biological theme, so that you can see the connections between chemistry and biology and the things that you might consider doing in the future. We want you to think about the molecules that are relevant to your body, the processes that occur in your body, the chemistry that's going on, and how energy plays a role. And we divided the course into 4 sections, and after each section there will be a midterm. The first one, or an exam. The first one is about matter.
The hygiene hypothesis that basically states that the more you are exposed at an early age, the earliest children born by cesarean section don't have the privilege of getting colonized with normal bacteria through the birth canal. They end up having more metabolic type issues. And just to make a final point about the dangers of antimicrobials, not just resistance, you screw up your microbiome. The microbiome is really essential in terms of who we are. There are 10 times more bacterial cells in our bodies than human cells, and for the most part, these are very good players.
Some years ago, Bjorn Lomborg, a young Danish statistician, published a book called The Skeptical Environmentalist. It became a bestseller and generated a lot of heat. Lomborg was attacked, abused, and accused of all manner of things, not because he denied the fact of global warming, in fact he affirmed it, but because on his analysis, the devil, and he says a lot of deviousness, was contained in the details presented concerning the size of the problem and what were the most responsible steps to take in response to global warming.
I think that
that's not going to be such a viable option for Cerberus, but that may be the way that they're going to approach it. Private equity, of course, is supposed to have the advantage of taking management out of the spotlight of quarterly profits and industry analysts and prying shareholder eyes, and that hypothetically gives them a chance to take slower, more patient routes to doing something to turn a company around. I would hope, and I have some, I guess, optimism that some of the Cerberus team will have some creativity and imagination.
It's both painful and insulting to rub salt in a wound, but a new study shows that salty skin can actually ward off infections, at least in mice fed a high-sodium diet. That's according to a study in the journal Cell Metabolism. We tend to think of dietary salt as a health threat, and it is. Too much sodium's been linked to high blood pressure and an increased risk for heart attack and stroke. But we also crave salty snacks and store the accumulated sodium in our bodies, particularly in the skin.
What's better than old wine in new bottles? For scientists, old wine in old bottles, preserved 150 feet down at the bottom of the sea. In 2010, divers were exploring a shipwreck in the Baltic when they discovered 168 bottles of what appeared to be wine. A quick swig from one of the long-submerged bottles revealed that the liquid within was actually champagne.
Our sun has a nasty habit of spitting volatile material at us. These incredibly hot bubbles of magnetized material are called coronal mass ejections, or CMEs, and they can hurtle towards Earth at thousands of miles per second. If one of a CME's magnetic fields is aligned in just the wrong way when the ejection reaches Earth, it could cause a magnetic storm that can temporarily disrupt the planet's magnetic field. Such a storm has the potential to wreak havoc on technologies like GPS satellites and utility grids, messing up radio transmissions and causing blackouts.
Ever try to get a baby to smile? It can seem close to impossible. And then suddenly there it is, that elusive, seemingly joyous grin. Well, it turns out those smiles aren't spontaneous. They're strategic. Researchers have found that when babies smile, it's for a reason. They want whoever they're interacting with, typically a parent, to smile back. And they time it just so, a smile here and a smile there. The researchers call it sophisticated timing. The study is in the journal PLOS One. By studying when smiles happened and what the subsequent effect was, the investigators were able to figure out that for mothers, the goal 70% of the time was to be smiling simultaneously, while for babies, 80% of the time, they just wanted their mother smiling at them. So mothers want the interaction, while babies just want to be smiled at. So your baby may not be able to feed itself, talk, or even turn over yet. But when it comes to smiles, babies seem to know exactly what they're up to.